Whenever I play a game, watch an anime, or consume a piece of media for the very first time, I tend to pick a favorite character right from the get-go. This character may not stay my favorite, but I do tend to have a bias towards them as I progress through the story. For Trigger Happy Havoc of Danganronpa, that character was Leon Kuwata, the ultimate baseball player. The fact that he wasn't happy with a specific talent in a school entirely centered around talent made him stand out to me, and I was really excited to see what this game would do with him as a character. Unfortunately for me, he was revealed to be the very first Blackened and got quickly executed because of that. When I went to see his free time events to get to know about him more, I was let down even further. Turns out his desire to be a musician was all just to impress some girl he likes, and he may not even hate baseball at all. I guess I was just sad because my second favorite character, Junko, had a similar fate to Leon and turned out to be one of the most important characters of Danganronpa history. So I was disappointed to see that Leon turned out to not be important in the long run. Or is he? Looking a bit more into Leon's character, I'm starting to think that he's not only a better character than I initially thought, but that he's one of the most important characters in the entire game, having as much significance as characters like Byakuya and Kyoko. I think I started to think more deeply about Leon when I read somewhere that he was designed to be a very relatable character, or something along those lines. This somewhat confused me, since I don't really associate Leon with being a relatable character. When I think of relatable characters, I usually think of characters that the audience is meant to project themselves onto, like Makoto or Hajime, or characters that I relate to personally, like Shuichi and Toko. This actually started to make me wonder what relatable even means in the first place. After doing some pondering, I realized that there are many different types of relatability, and that there are different aspects of a character that can be relatable. Not only is Makoto's background as an average kid something that is relatable to many players, but so is his constant self-comparison to his peers. There was probably some point in your life where you looked up to someone more successful than you and compared yourself to them, usually degrading yourself in the process. This specific feeling that Makoto experiences throughout the game is something that makes him relatable. Initially, I thought Kaede was an unrelatable protagonist because of her go-getter, never-give-up attitude, which differs from mine. However, she also has certain aspects to her that make her relatable to Danganronpa's audience. Her drive to end the killing game before it starts reflects the audience's frustration with the same old formula of Danganronpa as a whole and their desire to see something different. So not only does Kaede's attitude feel relatable to the audience in a meta sense, it also gives them a sense of hope that, this time, things will be different. Flaws, too, can be seen as relatable, which brings us over to Leon. Leon wanting to do something but lacking any motivation or drive to actually take it seriously is one of the most common flaws out there, especially among middle-class citizens such as Danganronpa's target demographic. If Makoto is supposed to be you, then Leon is someone you know in real life. You've probably met someone who is very close to Leon, such as a friend, relative, coworker, or even yourself. I, for one, relate to Leon with how I always want to do something grand, but never actually go through it. Okay, so you're probably thinking, okay, so Leon is somewhat relatable, but not really. How does this make him an important character? Well, you make a good point, and now is when I answer your question. You see, one of the main contributors to Danganronpa's success is its looming sense of dread and despair that lingers throughout the game, which is created from certain first impressions that you experience from the game. Things like the opening cutscene, art style, soundtrack, first body discovery, and yes, first punishment, all have to give a lasting impact that resonates with you throughout your entire playthrough. The reason why Leon is such an important Danganronpa character is because he's the perfect character to be the first Blackened, and if any other character were to take his place, the lasting effect that the punishment gives on the player would not nearly be as strong. This is because, as a character, Leon is actually a lot more ground-to-earth and realistic compared to the other characters. This may be surprising, considering that his most notable moment is his freak-out in the trial, but it's true. He's typically calm, but can get angry and upset when it seems logical to do so. He swears often, but he never feels like he forces it. Leon's not downright evil, but he also has genuine, unlikable flaws to him, so he's not just a good guy either. This realism also connects to Leon's murder motive, being that he killed Sayaka in retaliation to almost getting killed. This is a motive that is often seen in real life, especially compared to every other murder in Trigger Happy Havoc, which are influenced by Monokuma's actions. The reason why Leon's relatively down-to-earth and realistic behavior is important for a first Blackened is because, by having someone be realistic, it is more personal to you, and thus, their struggles and suffering connect to you much more. Which is more disturbing to you, having a cartoon character be crushed by an anvil, or having an adult man be dragged off screen as he desperately screams for help? Sure, the former was far more gruesome, but it was also far less realistic, so you don't really connect with the character all that well, and thus, you don't really register the pain the character feels as really painful at all. For the latter, the adult man resembles you more, and you can see and hear the immense fear he is experiencing. You don't even know what's going to happen to the man. For all we know, he could just be going to the dentist. But that doesn't matter because you connect to the character far more, and so his fear becomes yours. That's why games like Smash Brawl and Dual Destinies have higher ratings. The graphics have improved, and thus, the pain has been amplified. Danganronpa is filled with extremes. Nearly all the characters are caricatures of some sort, with extreme designs, extreme personalities, and extreme emotions. Like with the cartoon, while they are very enjoyable, it is harder to personally relate to them, and thus, harder to register the immense pain they are going through. If you want to see what I'm talking about, look no further than the culprit from the Danganronpa demo, Hifumi. Everything Hifumi does is over the top, and for the majority of the game, his entire purpose was just being the butt of a joke. Even if Hifumi's murder was a sympathetic one, it would be hard to feel his despair because there aren't any humanizing traits that make him relatable. Not only is his personality hard to personally connect to, but so is his physical appearance. Hifumi's design is purposefully made to look more cartoonish than the others, and while that perfectly represents his comedic potential, it makes it a lot harder for viewers to be disturbed at his death. If viewers were to see Hifumi be the first one executed, they would have a much weaker impression of the overall game, because they aren't seeing a real defined person suffer right in front of their eyes. They are seeing a cartoon character go kaboom. Probably thinking, yeah, of course Hifumi would make a terrible impression as the first Blackened. But surely there are some characters that could do Leon's job as the first Blackened just as well, if not better, right? However, I disagree with that statement, and I will go through each of the other characters to show that they wouldn't be able to give as lasting of an impression as Leon did when he was the first Blackened. Byakuya, Celeste, Taka, Toko, and Yasuhiro would not be suitable Blackens for the same reason Hifumi wouldn't. All of them are over-the-top anime tropes that are hard to personally connect to. You wouldn't see a Byakuya, Toko, or Taka in real life. Sure, you could find people who are somewhat similar to them, but their antics wouldn't be to the exaggerated level that these characters are. I feel like Mondo and Junko would also fall into this category, but it's to a lesser extent. So while they actually have a chance to be the first Blackened, they aren't as down-to-earth as Leon is. I also feel like Chihiro would fall into this category, but to a lesser extent, and even if you don't consider him to fall into this category, there's another big reason as to why he can't be the first Blackened, which I will discuss later. Kyoko and Sakura are also hard to personally relate to, but it's in a different way than the other characters. While these characters are somewhat down-to-earth, they're also highly idealized, and lack the flaws needed to personally connect to them. Also, it would simply be hard to picture these characters suffer in general because we never really saw them troubled to begin with. If those two were the first Blackened, viewers would be confused as to why this seemingly disturbing situation doesn't bother the killer, and thus will not take the concept of punishment seriously. So that leaves us with Makoto, Sayaka, and Aoi as potential first Blackened replacements. Makoto obviously wouldn't work since he's the protagonist. While it is possible for the protagonist to be the murderer, I feel like doing it on the very first case of the series would be way too soon, as it raises audience expectation way too high to the point where it's inevitable that they would be let down. Sayaka actually has somewhat of a chance to be the first Blackened if she wasn't already the first victim, and like how I believe Leon is the perfect first Blackened, I believe Sayaka is the perfect first victim. Her arc starts off as seemingly predictable for a murder victim, only for it to be revealed that she isn't perfectly good either, which introduces viewers to Danganronpa's grey morality and twisted nature. Also, Sayaka can't kill herself for the same reason Makoto can't be the first Blackened. It's way too big of a twist for the very first case. So what about Aoi? She's really down to earth like Leon and has a realistic mix of likable aspects and flaws. Why can't she be the first Blackened? Well, there's another reason as to why Leon's the perfect Blackened that I haven't talked about until now, and it's also the reason why Chihiro can't be the first Blackened either. And also the reason why I really don't like what they did with the manga adaptation for Leon's murder. You see, when I played the first trial and got to the point where Leon is found guilty, I was completely on his side. He didn't mean to kill Sayaka, it was in self-defense, I thought to myself as Leon said the same thing a couple seconds later. However, when Celeste talked about how Leon could have stopped at any time, I was absolutely speechless because I had nothing that could really refute it, which made my heart utterly sink. What made Leon's status as the first Blackened so powerful is that it's hard to label his motive as sympathetic or unsympathetic, so you are left in despair as you want to believe in him, but there's this terrifying thought at the back of your head that he is truly guilty and that he kinda deserves it. watching him is like watching a person in real life get sentenced for a crime they committed. You can feel the pain and agony the culprit is going through as they're at the witness stand, but deep down, both you and the culprit know they committed the crime. We just don't want to accept it. Characters like Aoi and Chihiro, while flawed, are always portrayed in a sympathetic light, which makes it easier to take in the fact that they are murderers because they murdered for good reasons. Even in Case 4 where Aoi messed up the crime scene, which admittedly was a great part of her character, she was portrayed in a way in which you were supposed to feel bad for her. You don't question whether it's right to like her or not because you know she did what she did with good intentions. With Leon, you're bouncing back and forth in your mind whether he was justified in what he did or not, and as Leon desperately cries for help, you eternally scream along with him, not knowing how to feel. And before you could rationally think of what to do or how to think, Leon has been brutally executed, and there's nothing you can do except stand there and reminisce on what you just saw. Now, this is not to say any of the other characters are unable to be effective murderers. I mean, 4 of them already are. It's just that Leon is really the only one that could be this successful at being the first Blackened in the series. I find it really funny how the first Blackens in the other games, Teru and Kaede, go against everything that made Leon's punishment so powerful. Teru is an overly cartoonish and unlikable stereotype, while Kaede is portrayed in the most sympathetic way humanly possible. But that doesn't mean those 2 murderers aren't effective at all. In fact, they are very effective at what they are trying to do, because Kaede and Teru were made to subvert expectations, while Leon was made to create those expectations. Whew, I finally have a serious reason to like this guy. Not that I needed one to begin with. I'd love this guy either way. It's perfectly fine to enjoy seemingly shallow characters like Leon, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Maybe if you love the character enough, you can see some hidden potential in them, just like how I did with Leon. What's your favorite character that people don't seem to think much about? Do you think there's something more to them, or do you just prefer them because you think they're cool with no deep reason for it? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.